The morning sun poured through the tall, arched windows of the bridal suite, casting a warm golden light across the pale pink roses and silk drapes. Everything should have felt magical, like a page from a storybook. My heart, however, was a storm of anxiety. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day I married the person I loved most in the world. But there was a weight I couldn't shake, a shadow that had been growing steadily over the past weeks. My mother appeared in the doorway, her heels clicking sharply against the polished wood floor. "We need to talk," she said, her voice strangely calm but edged with something I couldn't quite place. An authority that allowed no argument. My father was behind her, silent, but his eyes were hard, expectant. The warmth I had hoped for, the shared excitement, was gone, replaced by something cold and unyielding. "Now," my father added, the single word was enough to make my stomach sink. I followed them to the small sitting room adjacent to the suite, the noise of the wedding preparations fading behind us. Chairs lined the walls, and a vase of lilies sat in the corner, untouched. My parents didn't sit. They never did when they were about to make a point. They expected to dominate every corner of your mind. "We've gone over every detail," my father began, his tone steady but sharp, "and we see that you want to go your own way." His eyes were fixed on mine, not with concern, but with calculation. "We're giving you one final chance." My chest tightened. "A final chance, for what? You follow our rules," my mother said, each word clipped and deliberate, every one of them. "The seating, the attire, the invitations, the ceremony itself, or you will pay for this wedding entirely on your own." The room spun slightly. Pay for my own wedding? After everything I had imagined, every laugh shared in planning, every memory of childhood dreams about this day, suddenly it felt like it was being held hostage. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This is my wedding. It's supposed to be about me, about us, not about whatever this is." My mother's lips tightened into a thin line. "We are serious. Every rule, every choice we've made for you since you were a child was for your own good, and this day is no different. You either comply, or you stand on your own. The choice is yours." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook, and I clutched the edge of a chair for support. Their words weren't just cruel, they were a betrayal. The people who had brought me into the world, who had held me when I cried, who had whispered advice in my ear late at night, were now demanding I surrender my joy to their version of perfection. My wedding day, the one day I had believed would be mine, had been transformed into a battleground. I don't know what to say," I stammered. I thought you'd be happy for me, that you'd support me." My father shook his head slowly. "Support doesn't mean letting you make mistakes. We're sparing you from regret. This is not negotiation. We've spent years building this family's image, and this wedding is the final piece. Don't make it a disgrace." The word disgrace hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell them that love isn't a transaction and happiness isn't something you pay for, but no words came. They had built a wall around my life so tall that I couldn't even see over it. I backed out of the room, trying to breathe, trying to push the tears away before they fell. The laughter from the bustling halls outside, the bridesmaids fixing hair, the florist arranging flowers felt like it belonged to someone else. I had imagined walking down that aisle with a sense of joy, with my heart brimming over, but now every step felt heavy, every smile forced. In that moment, I realized that the wedding wasn't mine at all. It belonged to them, to their rules, to their pride. And just like that, the day I had dreamed about for years had become the day I realized my parents' love was conditional, and their approval had a price I wasn't sure I was willing to pay. And deep down, a tiny ember of defiance began to glow. A quiet, dangerous thought that whispered, maybe this isn't over. Maybe I don't have to let them win. After the confrontation with my parents, the wedding day felt less like a celebration and more like walking through a maze of expectations I had never signed up for. I wandered through the hotel corridors, the muffled hum of last-minute arrangements echoing in my ears. The flowers smelled sweeter than ever, the linen softer than I remembered, but none of it reached me. My mind kept replaying my parents' ultimatum, follow our rules or pay yourself. It was in that restless wandering that I stumbled upon the guest list. I hadn't intended to, truly. I was looking for the place cards to double, check a seating arrangement when the binder fell open, almost as if fate itself wanted me to see it. And there it was, names that mattered to me, friends I had grown up with, college roommates who had stood by me through heartbreak, my closest cousins, were nowhere to be found. Instead, the list was filled with distant relatives I barely knew, people my parents approved of, people who would stand there not to celebrate me, but to witness their idea of propriety. I ran my fingers over the pages, disbelief turning into a sharp, searing ache. How could they? I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling. They know who matters to me, they've always known. I flipped through every page, and the betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined. The people who had celebrated my victories, comforted me through losses, laughed until we cried. They had been erased, replaced by faces I barely recognized, all carefully chosen to reflect my parents' control, their obsession with appearances. Every name I read was another reminder. This wedding was never about me. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling. The world felt suddenly smaller and heavier. My parents had not just issued an ultimatum. They had rewritten my life's milestones, molding them into something I didn't recognize. Every memory, every expectation, every dream I had had for this day seemed to mock me now. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the binder across the room, but I didn't. Not yet, because in the quiet of that small room, anger began to simmer. Not the wild, unthinking anger of a child, but a sharp, intelligent fire. My parents thought they could manipulate me, control me, erase the people I loved from my life without consequence. But they underestimated me, underestimated how deeply I cared about those missing from the list, underestimated my ability to act. I thought of my fiancé waiting downstairs, unaware of the invisible chains being wrapped around our day. I thought of my friends, my siblings, my mentors, and the love I had cultivated for decades, and I realized I didn't have to accept this. I could reclaim my wedding, my happiness, and even my parents' perception of me, but I would do it on my terms. I closed the binder with a quiet snap, the sound louder than I expected. A plan began to form, tentative but potent. Invitations could be sent in secret. I could rally those my parents excluded. I could reclaim the joy they tried to hijack, one careful move at a time. Their control was powerful, yes, but not absolute. For the first time since the ultimatum, I allowed myself a small, wicked smile. There was a thrill in thinking of how they would react when they discovered the true scope of my day. Not chaos or destruction, but proof that their authority had limits, and that real love, couldn't be dictated by fear or pride. The rest of the day passed in a blur of rehearsals and makeup checks. My parents continued their critique of every detail, blissfully unaware of the quiet rebellion brewing just out of sight. Each suggestion they made, every criticism they issued, became an opportunity for me to refine my plan. I listened politely, nodding, smiling, all the while plotting subtle ways to reclaim what was rightfully mine. That evening, as I lay in bed with the soft hum of the hotel air conditioner filling the room, I could no longer see my parents as protectors or guides. They were obstacles entirely human, fallible, and capable of cruelty, cloaked as care. And I understood something profound. The greatest victories aren't won through confrontation alone, but through patience, strategy, and the quiet courage to defy the people who think they own you. Tears came then, not just from sadness, but from the power of realization. I had been hurt, yes, but I had also been awakened. And with awakening came a determination as sharp as glass. My wedding would be mine, my joy would be mine, and the people who truly mattered would witness it, not because my parents allowed it, but because I refused to let them dictate my life any longer. And as I drifted to a fitful sleep that night, I held on to that thought like a secret flame. A storm was coming, and it would be sweet, quiet, and utterly mine. The morning of the wedding arrived with all the usual fanfare, the scent of fresh flowers, the hum of decorators adjusting centerpieces, and the faint rustle of silk gowns brushing against polished floors. To everyone else, it was a day of excitement and beauty. To me, it was the stage for a careful, quiet rebellion that had been forming in my mind since discovering the manipulated guest list. I moved through the halls with a practiced smile, nodding at caterers and coordinators, letting my parents believe I was entirely absorbed in their vision of perfection. Every compliment I offered them, every nod of agreement, was a lie wrapped in grace. Behind that serene facade, I was calculating, observing, and planning. Each glance, each whispered word, became a piece of a larger puzzle. My first act of defiance was small but significant. Earlier, I had drafted secret invitations to those my parents had excluded, childhood friends, colleagues who had become like family, and cousins who had always supported me without condition. Each envelope carried not just an invite, but a message. You are wanted, you are loved, you belong. I enlisted the help of my younger sibling, someone who had quietly resented our parents' controlling nature for years. With careful instructions and hushed tones, we ensured the invitations reached the intended recipients without drawing attention. My siblings' eyes glimmered with excitement. The thrill of rebellion was infectious, and I felt a small surge of satisfaction. It was the first tangible step toward reclaiming my wedding, and it felt intoxicating. Throughout the day, my parents continued their meticulous oversight, critiquing every flower arrangement, every seating chart, every minor detail as though perfection depended solely on their approval. They were oblivious to the quiet resistance unfolding around them. I let them dominate the room, let their pride fill the air, all while the seeds of my subtle victory took root. The real joy, though, came in small, unnoticed moments. A friend who had been excluded texted me, confirming they would attend the after-party. Another cousin whispered their excitement in passing. Each of these small triumphs felt like a victory against the invisible chains my parents had tried to wrap around me. I began to realize that rebellion didn't have to be loud or confrontational. It could be clever, patient, and deeply satisfying. Even as I prepared for the ceremony, I found ways to reclaim control. The bridal bouquet, once dictated by my mother's insistence on certain colors and flowers, was subtly rearranged to include blooms with personal significance. The music playlist, while technically approved by my parents, included hidden favorites that would only be recognized by those I truly loved. These small gestures were quiet acts of defiance, each one a whisper of independence in the midst of orchestrated perfection. I noticed, too, the subtle shift in my own confidence. For weeks, I had felt trapped, constrained by the expectations of others. But now, moving through the day with a quiet purpose, I felt a sense of power I hadn't known I possessed. My parents had underestimated me, underestimated the depth of my loyalty to those who mattered, and underestimated my ability to reclaim joy without losing my composure. By the time the ceremony began, I felt a strange combination of nerves and exhilaration. The grandeur of the hall, the gleaming chandeliers, the rows of polished chairs. All of it was still a stage set by my parents, but I had found cracks in the script. And in those cracks, I had planted the beginnings of my own narrative. As I walked down the aisle, I held my head high, keeping my composure while letting subtle glances at my secretly invited guests reassure me. They were arriving quietly, slipping into the margins of the day, yet their presence filled the room with an invisible warmth that my parents' carefully curated guest list could never provide. The weight of betrayal was still there, heavy and biting, but for the first time since the ultimatum, I felt like I was in control. By the end of the ceremony, I understood something profound. Resistance didn't have to be loud. Small, clever acts of defiance could restore dignity and joy in ways confrontation never could. My parents, so certain of their dominance, remained oblivious to the subtle victories unfolding beneath their noses. And as I watched my friends and loved ones arrive, laughing quietly and embracing each other, I felt a thrill unlike any other, the first taste of sweet, patient revenge. Not destructive, not cruel, simply reclaiming my life and my happiness, one quiet, deliberate act at a time. Tonight I would celebrate, tomorrow the full scope of my subtle triumphs would reveal itself, and I would do it all with grace, dignity, and the undeniable satisfaction of proving that even the most calculated control could not suppress love, loyalty, or courage. The reception hall shimmered under a cascade of chandeliers, their light bouncing off crystal glasses and polished silver. To the untrained eye, everything was flawless, the perfect wedding my parents had orchestrated, complete with carefully selected guests, music, and menu. To me, it was a stage, but this time, I was the one directing the scene from behind the calm, composed mask I wore so well. As the doors to the after-party quietly opened, my secretly invited guests began to trickle in. Childhood friends, cousins who had been absent from the official list, colleagues who had become family, they arrived with smiles, hugs, and whispered excitement. The warmth they brought was palpable, and immediately it filled the corners of the room that my parents' controlled guest list had left cold and empty. I watched them enter with a small, triumphant smile, letting the joy of their presence settle like a secret victory in my chest. Every laugh, every affectionate squeeze of a hand, every look of recognition and love felt like a reclamation of my day. My parents, busy in their prideful scrutiny, remained oblivious to the shift their control had begun to unravel, quietly and irreversibly. I moved through the crowd with the grace of a queen on her own stage, greeting each guest with warmth and gratitude. In their eyes, I saw understanding, the silent acknowledgement of the betrayal I had endured. I didn't need to explain, they knew. And their presence, their love, became a shield around me, a subtle, powerful way of asserting that no matter my parents' manipulations, the heart of the celebration was mine. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. A cousin, hesitant at first, mentioned in passing to another guest that they hadn't been invited originally. A friend questioned why certain distant relatives had been prioritized over lifelong companions. Whispers began to circulate, gentle but growing, until the truth of my parents' manipulations became apparent to everyone in the room. I noticed the change in my parents almost immediately. My mother's forced smile faltered, her eyes darting nervously. My father's posture stiffened, the practiced calm in his face unable to conceal the surprise and unease he felt. Their carefully constructed image of control was quietly but thoroughly dismantled, and the more they tried to reclaim it, the more obvious their missteps became. Instead of confrontation, I chose silence. I allowed the truth to reveal itself naturally, like a tide rising slowly and inevitably. Every gesture of genuine love, every heartfelt laugh, every shared memory among my friends and family, stood in stark contrast to the hollow perfection my parents had tried to impose. And in that contrast, my revenge found its sweetness not in humiliation, but in revelation. When it was finally my turn to speak, I rose gracefully, the room falling into a hush. I thanked everyone for attending, my words sincere and steady, carrying gratitude and warmth. I spoke of love, of family, of friendship, and of the importance of those who support you unconditionally. Every syllable was a quiet reminder of who truly mattered, and the audience, my guests, my secretly invited allies, felt the depth of my conviction. My parents, cornered by their own pride, remained silent. They had no response that could undo the tide of truth. And in that moment, I realized that revenge didn't need to be vicious or dramatic. It wasn't about shaming them in front of the crowd. It was about reclaiming my joy, asserting my agency, and surrounding myself with those who truly loved me. That was victory enough. Later, as I danced with my partner under the soft glow of the chandeliers, I felt the last remnants of fear and resentment fall away. The day had begun as a battlefield, the air thick with ultimatums and manipulation, but now it was ours. Every smile, every whispered congratulations, every heartfelt embrace belonged to me. My wedding was no longer a monument to my parents' control. It was a celebration of resilience, love, and quiet triumph. In the weeks that followed, the memory of the ultimatum faded, replaced by laughter, photographs, and stories shared among those who had truly mattered. I learned that betrayal could wound deeply, but cleverness, patience, and courage could heal just as profoundly. And I learned that the sweetest revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about living fully, unapologetically, and with the people who choose to stand by you. As I looked back on that day, I realized something essential. The power of choice belongs to the person brave enough to claim it. My parents had tried to dictate my happiness, but I had reclaimed it with dignity, grace, and unwavering love. And in that reclamation, I discovered the truth of joy. It is not given, it is taken quietly, patiently, and entirely on your own terms. That night, as the last guest departed, and the hall grew silent, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My wedding had been stolen in part, but it had been restored in full by me. And for the first time, I understood that the most profound revenge is not in vengeance, but in the celebration of life reclaimed, love embraced, and dignity preserved.